If you ever wonder how people actually make cutscenes in Godot, this video is for you. Now, this isn't going to be a step-by-step tutorial. Every game has different needs, especially if you're making something like a JRPG. Instead, I want to show you the pipeline I've built over the past few weeks and hopefully give you a few ideas that you can adapt to your own project. Recently, I posted this cutscene on Blue Sky and Discord, and one of the questions I got was, how did you make this? The answer is actually much simpler than it looks. The trick isn't making cutscenes, it's building the small collection of tools that work together. The foundation of my entire dialogue system is a plugin called Dialogue Manager. Could I write my own dialogue system? Sure. But honestly, I don't really need to. Dialogue Manager already solves the hard part, so instead of spending weeks rewriting features that already exist, I can focus on building the things that my game actually needs. I also like Dialogic, and it's a fantastic plugin, but my games are fairly linear, so the Dialogue Manager ends up fitting my workflow much better. So one thing I always recommend is thinking in terms of actions instead of cutscenes. Instead of asking how do I make this scene, ask what actions do I need? Move an NPC, move the player, play an animation, wait, shake the camera, show an emotion, fade in or fade out the screen. Once I have these building blocks, making a cutscene becomes more like writing a script than programming. That's why I created this cutscene sequence. It's honestly a mess. There are a lot of to-dos everywhere, bad code, typos, but it does exactly what I need. For example, I have this function called move to, which moves an NPC to a specific position. Move to vector, which is useful for diagonal movement. Locate at, which instantly teleports a character somewhere. Nothing here is complicated. They're just small functions that I keep reusing over and over again. Dialogue Manager gives me a really nice scripting language to connect all these actions together. It handles dialogue, waits, jumps, conditions, titles, all of that. If you haven't checked its documentation yet, I recommend doing that because it's surprisingly powerful. Another thing I use a lot is this dialogue balloon. It's just a speech balloon that appears above the character's head. I used the default balloon for a long time while prototyping, but eventually I wanted something that matched my game style. Mine is based on the example project that comes with the Dialogue Manager. I probably should have renamed a few things here, but it's working. If you don't want to build one yourself from the ground up, Nathan has some really nice UI prototypes in his page, really worth checking out. I actually use one of them as reference because sizing balloons correctly is more annoying than it sounds. I also have these little emotion icons that appear above characters. They're based on Kine's icons, and I wrapped everything into a simple scene that just plays the correct animation depending on the emotion I request. They're like thinking, music, sad, frustration, sleeping, stuff like that. Again, it's nothing fancy, but just another reusable tool. One thing I really like about Dialogue Manager is that you can await almost everything. That means I can wait for animation, wait for an emotion, for movement, camera transition, everything becomes nicely synchronized without turning into a callback hell. Let's look at the actual cutscene now. The first thing you notice is this condition. I have a data manager that works a lot like RPG Maker's switches and variables. It's very simple. I assign a name to a value and later I can check that value anywhere in the game. Right now I'm storing everything as resources, but I know this is not the best solution. So eventually I'll move to JSON or another save format. I don't know yet, but for prototyping it works perfectly fine. When the player enters the dungeon, the game checks whether they've already seen the cutscene. If they have, the NPCs are simply hidden and nothing happens. If they haven't, the sequence begins. The screen fades to black, the player is hidden, NPCs are positioned, and the camera is prepared, so you feel like a film director or something. Also, this is very similar how RPG Maker handles events. I grew up making games with RPG Maker, so a lot of my workflow ended up following the same philosophy. One function I use constantly is find node. It lets me grab any node in the scene by name. Most of the time I'm using it to trigger animation players. I don't animate the whole code scene inside animation players because I find that approach a bit fragile. So instead I use animation players for isolated things like changing the camera priority, playing a shake effect, triggering a sound. For the cameras, I'm using Phantom Camera because it's incredibly simple to set up. Each camera is just focused on a different point of the scene and I switch priorities whenever I need to highlight something. The cutscene is basically a sequence of simple actions. NPCs move to waypoints, characters look at each other, the dialogue plays. Emotion icons appear, the camera changes, the player joins the scene, more dialogue, more movement. So everything is built from the same handful of functions. You'll also notice that I don't use the navigation agent for these scripted movements. For enemies, I may use them, but for cutscenes, not really. If I already know exactly where the character needs to go, I just calculate the direction manually and move them in a straight line. It's much easier to debug and much more predictable. Characters can also play animations through another helper function. Under the hood, they use an animation tree with things like laugh, look down, look and left, shake their heads, idle state, something like that. Again, they're just actions I can trigger from dialogue. Once you've built these systems, making new cutscenes become very fast. You're not programming anymore, you're just sequencing actions. Finally, once the cutscene ends, I simply save a variable saying that this cutscene has already been played. The next time the player enters this dungeon, the game skips everything automatically. And if I ever want another version of the scene, maybe after defeating the boss of the dungeon, I just add another condition and write a new sequence. That's one of the things I like the most about the dialogue manager. The dialogue file itself becomes some kind of logic that drives the entire event. That's pretty much my workflow. It's not the only way to build cutscenes in Godot, of course, but it's been working really well for my project, and hopefully it gave you some ideas on how to make your own. So if you'd like to see more videos breaking down systems like quests, inventories, NPCs, or any JRPG mechanic, let me know in the comments. And if you're also into making JRPGs in Godot, feel free to join my Discord below. We're still a small community, but I love to see what everyone is building. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.